Imagine two massive cities filled with wealth, power, and pride, completely reduced to ash in just a few hours. No armies marched in. No earthquakes tore the land. It wasn't a natural disaster. It was judgment from heaven. Fire fell like rain, and within moments, everything was gone. What kind of angels move with that kind of speed? Who could carry out such a terrifying order without hesitation? This isn't just about sin. It's about a divine force so powerful even Abraham's prayers couldn't stop it. In this video, we reveal how the angel erased Sodom and why God didn't wait another day. What if the most dangerous cities in history weren't filled with poverty, but with wealth? That's exactly what Sodom and Gomorrah were like. These twin cities sat by the Dead Sea, shining with gold and overflowing with food. From far away, they looked like paradise. But inside these wealthy cities, something terrible was happening. The people there had forgotten how to be kind. They had so much, but instead of sharing, they used their riches to be cruel. They made games out of hurting the poor. They set traps for strangers who came to visit. They twisted the rules of welcoming guests into ways to harm them instead. In Sodom, if you gave food to a hungry person, you could be punished. One story tells of a young woman named Palith who secretly gave food to a poor family. When the leaders found out, they covered her with honey and put her on a wall where bees stung her to death. This is how far they had fallen. The Bible tells us in Ezekiel 16:49, "Now this was the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters were proud, overfed, and unconcerned. They did not help the poor and needy." Their problem wasn't just that they did bad things in private. They had broken the basic rules of treating others with respect. These weren't quiet sins done in secret. The cries of the people they hurt grew louder each day. Imagine thousands of voices, the poor, the hungry, the strangers, all crying out at once because of how badly they were treated. These weren't just whispers. They were screams that reached all the way to heaven. God hears when people cry out. He heard the Israelites when they were slaves in Egypt. He heard Abel's blood crying from the ground. And now, he heard the cries coming from Sodom and Gomorrah. The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, God said. Their sin is so serious that I will go down and see for myself. Think about that for a moment. The creator of everything decided this was so important that he wouldn't just send a message. He wouldn't just send angels. He would come himself to see what was happening. It was like a cosmic alarm bell ringing. The sound of so much injustice and cruelty had reached God's throne, and he couldn't ignore it anymore. When the cries of the hurt reach heaven, God always responds. The people of Sodom kept living their wealthy, wicked lives, not knowing that divine visitors were already on their way. They thought their high walls would protect them. They believed their riches made them untouchable. They were wrong. While Sodom continued its cruel games, elsewhere a very different scene was unfolding. Under the shade of great oak trees at a place called Mamre, an old man named Abraham was about to have the most important conversation of his life, one that would decide the fate of entire cities. But before we see what happened next, we want you to think about something important. These stories aren't just old tales. They show us how God responds when people use their power to hurt others. Have you ever tried to change God's mind? Abraham did, and what happened next will change your outlook toward God and his decisions. The day was hot, and Abraham sat in the doorway of his tent, resting in the shade of the oak trees at Mamre. He had just returned from battle and was enjoying a moment of peace. Suddenly, he looked up and saw 3 strangers standing nearby. In those days, welcoming travelers was sacred. But Abraham went above and beyond. He ran to meet them, bowed to the ground, and begged them to stay. "Let me bring water to wash your feet," he said. "Rest under this tree while I get some food for you." Abraham hurried to prepare fresh bread, choice meat, and milk, a feast fit for kings, and stood by while they ate. What Abraham didn't know yet was that these weren't ordinary visitors. As they finished eating, one of them asked, "Where is your wife Sarah?" This question would have startled Abraham. How did this stranger know his wife's name? Then came the words that changed everything. "I will surely return to you in a year, and your wife Sarah will have a son." Sarah, listening from inside the tent, laughed to herself. She was far too old to have a baby. The visitor responded, "Is anything too hard for the Lord?" In that moment, Abraham realized who he was talking to. This was no ordinary meeting. He was in the presence of God himself. But the conversation wasn't over. As two of the visitors turned toward Sodom, the Lord shared something shocking with Abraham. "The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, I am going down to see if they are as wicked as the outcry suggests. If not, I will know." Abraham's heart sank. His nephew Lot lived in Sodom with his family. Would God destroy them along with the wicked? He couldn't just let it happen without saying something. So Abraham did something incredibly brave. He began to negotiate with God. "Would you sweep away the righteous with the wicked?" he asked. "What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Would you still destroy it?" "If I find 50 righteous people in Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake," the Lord replied. But Abraham wasn't done. With amazing courage but deep humility, he pressed further. "What about 45? What about 40? 30? 20? Each time, God agreed to spare the cities if that many righteous people could be found. Finally, Abraham asked, "What if only 10 can be found?" "For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it," God promised. Think about this moment. A human being stood face to face with the judge of all the earth and negotiated for mercy. With each question, Abraham revealed something beautiful about God's character, that his justice is always mixed with mercy, that he doesn't treat the righteous and the wicked the same way. As the sun began to set, the conversation ended. Abraham had gone as far as he dared. The Lord departed, and Abraham returned to his tent, surely wondering if even 10 righteous people could be found in such a wicked place. What Abraham didn't know was that the two other visitors, powerful angels, were already approaching the gates of Sodom. As darkness fell, they entered a city completely unaware that judgment was walking its streets. The question hanging in the air was clear. Would these angels find even 10 good people, or was Sodom already beyond saving? When the sun started to set on Sodom, Lot sat by the city gates. This wasn't just any spot. It was where important people handled business and made decisions. Lot had become someone important in Sodom, even though he hadn't forgotten the ways of his uncle Abraham. As darkness crept in, Lot spotted two strangers entering the city. Something about them seemed different. Maybe it was the way they walked or how they carried themselves. But Lot knew one thing for sure. Strangers in Sodom after dark were in terrible danger. "My lords," Lot said, jumping to his feet and bowing low, "please come to my house. You can wash your feet, spend the night, and continue your journey in the morning." At first, they refused. "No, we will spend the night in the square," they answered. Lot's heart raced. He knew what happened to travelers who slept in Sodom's streets. "No," he insisted, almost begging them. Finally, they agreed to go with him. Inside his home, Lot showed them true hospitality. He washed their feet, baked fresh bread, and prepared a meal. This kindness stood out like a bright light in a city known for cruelty to strangers. But the peace didn't last long. Before they could go to sleep, something terrifying happened. Outside, voices grew louder and angrier. Soon, Lot's house was surrounded by men, not just a few troublemakers, but people from every corner of Sodom, young and old alike. "Where are the men who came to you tonight?" they shouted. "Bring them out to us." Their intentions were clear and evil. These weren't curious neighbors. They were a violent mob, ready to attack and humiliate the visitors. The very thing Lot had feared was now banging on his door. What happened next shows just how desperate Lot had become. He stepped outside, closing the door behind him to protect his guests. "Please, my friends, don't do this wicked thing," he begged. Then came words that shock us even today. "Look, I have 2 daughters who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do what you like with them. But don't do anything to these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof." It's hard for us to understand why Lot would offer his own daughters to protect strangers. But in his world, the duty to protect guests was considered sacred, even above family. This impossible choice shows just how twisted Sodom had become, forcing a righteous man to consider the unthinkable. The mob wasn't interested in Lot's offer. "Get out of our way," they yelled. "This fellow came here as a foreigner, and now he wants to play the judge." They pushed toward Lot, ready to break down the door. That's when everything changed. Suddenly, Lot felt strong hands pulling him back inside. The strangers yanked him to safety and slammed the door shut. Then, they did something that revealed their true identity. They struck the entire mob with blindness. Young and old alike stumbled in the darkness, unable to find the door. "Do you have anyone else here?" the angels asked Lot urgently. "Sons-in-law, sons, daughters, or anyone else in the city who belongs to you. Get them out of here, because we are going to destroy this place. The outcry to the Lord against its people is so great that he has sent us to destroy it." As the confused mob groped in darkness outside, Lot faced an even darker truth. He had hours, not days, to save those he loved. Imagine being told you could save your life by simply not looking back. How hard could that be? For Lot's wife, it proved impossible. The night dragged on as Lot rushed to warn his family. He found his sons-in-law, the men who were pledged to marry his daughters. "Quick," he urged them. "Get out of this place because the Lord is about to destroy the city." But their response cut deep. They laughed at him. They thought he was joking. How could mighty Sodom fall in a single day? Impossible. As the first light of dawn broke across the sky, the angels became more urgent. There was no more time. "Hurry!" they insisted, grabbing Lot's hand, his wife's hand, and the hands of his two daughters. Even though Lot had been warned all night, he still hesitated. The angels had to physically pull them from the house and drag them to the city gates. "Run for your lives," the angels commanded once they were outside the walls. "Don't look back and don't stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains or you will be swept away." But even now, with destruction minutes away, Lot was still bargaining. "The mountains are too far," he pleaded. "Look, there's a small town nearby called Zoar. Let me go there instead. It's close and small. Can't you spare it?" The angel agreed. "Very well. I will grant this request too. I will not destroy the small town. But hurry. I cannot do anything until you reach it." The family ran across the plain as the sun began to climb into the sky. Their legs ached and their lungs burned. Behind them stood everything they owned, their home, their possessions, the life they had built. Ahead was nothing but uncertainty. "Don't look back," Lot called to his family as they fled. The warning echoed in their ears with every footstep. By the time Lot reached the gates of Zoar, the sun had fully risen. He had made it to safety, just in time. But where was his wife? She had been right behind him, running with their daughters across the plain. But somewhere along the way, she had done the one thing they were told not to do. She looked back. Was it to see her beautiful home one last time? Was it because she couldn't believe destruction would really come? Was it because her heart was still in Sodom? We don't know. But what we do know is what happened next. In that moment of disobedience, Lot's wife was transformed into a pillar of salt. Not just any shape, but a human form, forever frozen in the act of looking backward. A monument to the danger of clinging to sin, even as rescue is offered. The words of the angel had been clear: don't look back. Such a simple command, yet impossible for someone whose heart remained in a condemned city. Meanwhile, far away in Mamre, Abraham woke early that morning. He hurried to the place where he had stood before the Lord, where he had pleaded for mercy. Looking toward Sodom and Gomorrah, what he saw took his breath away. What kind of power could turn thriving cities to ash in mere hours? The answer revealed why even Abraham couldn't stop what was coming. As the morning sun rose over Sodom, nothing had seemed unusual. Merchants were getting ready to trade. Children played in the streets. Families were eating breakfast. No one suspected it would be their last meal. Suddenly, the clear blue sky changed. Dark clouds gathered out of nowhere, swirling above the cities like nothing anyone had ever seen. This wasn't a normal storm. The clouds glowed with an eerie light that made people stop and stare upward in fear. Then it happened. Genesis 19:24 tells us, Then the Lord rained down burning sulphur on Sodom and Gomorrah, from the Lord out of the heavens. The words rained down show us this wasn't just a few spots of fire. This was a downpour of destruction, covering everything, like the flood had covered the earth in Noah's time. Burning rocks fell from the sky, crashing through rooftops and setting everything ablaze. Sulphur, yellow rocks that burned with a terrible smell, landed everywhere at once. This wasn't a slow-moving disaster that people could run from. It was instant, and everywhere, at the same time. Houses that had stood for generations crumbled in moments. The wealthy markets where merchants had proudly displayed their goods became furnaces. The city walls, once built for protection, now trapped people inside with nowhere to run. The screams didn't last long. Animals, people, even the plants in the fields. Everything was consumed by this supernatural fire. Nothing was spared. The judgment that had been building for years was delivered in mere hours. And it wasn't just Sodom and Gomorrah. Nearby cities, Admah and Zeboim, also burned. The entire valley, once described as well-watered, like the garden of the Lord, became a wasteland of ash and smoke. From the hills of Mamre, many miles away, Abraham stood watching. He saw a huge column of thick smoke rising into the sky, like a giant furnace. The smoke climbed higher and higher, visible from miles around. It was so tall that people in distant lands would have seen it and wondered what terrible thing had happened. This was no ordinary fire. The pillar of smoke stood as a witness to all who saw it. This is what happens when sin goes too far. Abraham stood in silence. Had God found 10 righteous people? Clearly not. His prayer had failed to save the cities. But as he watched the smoke rise, he must have wondered, what had become of his nephew Lot? Had he escaped, or had he perished with the wicked? What Abraham couldn't see was that the angels had completed their mission perfectly. These weren't gentle messengers bringing good news. They were warriors, executing judgment with divine precision. They had saved the righteous few, Lot and his daughters, but showed no mercy to anyone else. The angels' power was terrifying. They could strike an entire mob blind with a single gesture. They could call fire down from heaven that consumed cities in hours. Most importantly, they never hesitated. When God said destroy, they destroyed completely. By noon it was over. Where proud cities had stood that morning, nothing remained but smoking ruins. The angels had done exactly what they came to do, swift execution of divine judgment. Later, Abraham would learn that Lot had survived. God had remembered Abraham's concern and saved his nephew, even while bringing justice to a wicked place. In one day, the world learned that God's patience has limits, that his warnings should be taken seriously, and that when his angels move to execute judgment, nothing can stand in their way.